Hi there. Thanks for tuning in to an Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. So today we're going to talk about Michelle Caulfield. Is that right?
That is correct.
I'm excited.
Corning Painted Post, New York.
Corning Painted Post, yes. I kept saying Corning. Wait, is it Corning Painted? Wait, where is it in New York?
It's so funny. That was, I don't know if I want to spoil it for folks, but the story that she said about the new hire.
Oh, yeah. No, we'll get there in a second because, again, it's about like perspective. Oh, I get, yeah. That was really funny. Okay, yeah, we want people to listen to that one where she's like, oh, yeah, no, that meeting won't be happening today, but you'll see why.
Exactly.
I did want to ask you about esports. Are you familiar with esports? Do you have an opinion about esports? Are you a gamer
am familiar
yourself?
I am a gamer. I mean, I love to play video games. My son is my eldest is the big video game player. Now Leo also is a little kid video game player. What about you? Do you play video games?
Yeah, not well. Like Mike, I used to some extent. I felt like I was pretty competent, but then I really am just a masher. Just like I don't know what I'm doing, and especially like I'll try to learn or play like NBA, and then I'll tell my kid like, oh, I've been practicing NBA. And then he comes in, it's like 30-3 and he's still like dunking on me and stealing the ball. I'm like, do you look at the score? Do you what are you doing? Like, you said you've been practicing. Well, not well, So the reason why I ask you, what's your opinion of esports is because I had an amazing principal. His name was Tony Grignani, and he approached me about instituting an esports league with our district and then having competing districts within our own little region that we had with athletics. And I was somewhat dismissive, but then he said, hey, look, these kids are all going home and they're gaming at home. So what if we were to sort of flip it and say, look, we want you to feel like you belong and that you have community here at the school. And so you're going to get a uniform. You're going to have requirements around behavior, around attendance, around academics, just like any other athlete or activities. And so then kids have this opportunity to be a part of their school district. Now, if you think about some of these games like League of Legends, so League of Legends requires that you actually like each person has a different role. They have strategy. They have to communicate with each other. There's nothing different between that and other sports. I mean, when you think about football or soccer or even baseball to some extent, I mean, they have to coordinate and work together. So I think it's marvelous. I totally got involved. When I say I got involved, I totally got behind in terms of supporting it. And then I met kids who came up to me and would say, hey, I understand that we owe you a thank you. I'm like, why do you owe me a thank you? Because my principal told me that you approved this. Or a parent who came up to me and said, my kid was not connected to school, had friends who were online, but really never felt like he connected or belonged to school until this esports league came to fruition. That became really special. So I'm all in when it comes to esports. So I love the fact that, when she talks about drone soccer, that's pretty neat too.
Yeah, it's amazing. It's totally amazing.
I love the fact that kids just feel connected. That's, I think, one of our biggest roles. As our first job in schools is to keep kids safe. Second piece is to really, and I think part of keeping them safe is having them feel connected, because kids who are connected to school don't want to hurt their schools.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's also interesting back to our own, probably multiple episodes at this point, our own understanding of our biases and the things that kept us connected to school, and how when that is thriving within a particular school system, I'm like, this is a great school. That's let kids drive. They will come up with things that you can't think of.
Yep.
It's not that nothing's wrong with the Friday night football game, but just because
that's a community builder too. And
sure.
A traditional way of bringing people together. So in her example, although it's not totally esports, but it did make me think of esports. And I'll just tell you, it's called drone soccer, and we'll tell you more about that in a minute. I will say also, like when the kids I remember I became superintendent, and I learned that one of the high schools had a zombie defense league. I was like, what? And the kids are like totally committed to this club for when there is an apocalypse and the zombies take over. I love it. Again, it was about connecting to school. So if it's all right, what I'd like to do is I'd like to listen to Michelle's conversation, and then let's come back. And some of the things I do want to talk about, obviously, is her after action review about her budget, because I think that's a really big piece. We haven't even talked about how New York State does its budgets. And then I want to talk about her recruitment strategies that she was using when recruiting staffing, which speaks to why she did not have a meeting with a particular art teacher or a candidate.
Right.
And
Correct.
then third is just, her continued work around connecting kids to school. I really thought she was marvelous. It would be great.
At the APC Leadership Collaborative, we know her very well. We've been working in Corning Paid Post for quite some time and feel honored to be partnered with her.
Okay, so let's do it. You're listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast. And here we go with Michelle Caulfield.
Imperfect leaders. Are you facing challenges filling open speech-language pathologist positions within your district? Kind of a silly question because I know you are. MPAT Speech understands the critical need for qualified professionals in your schools. They recognize that communication lies at the heart of academic success, and that's why they're dedicated to helping you bridge the gap by offering expert therapists and innovative telehealth solutions. Don't let open positions hinder your students' success. Partner with MPAT Speech today and ensure every child in your district has access to the speech therapy they deserve. MPAT Speech, EMPAT Speech.com. Empowering students, empowering schools.
Today on An Imperfect Leader, our guest is Michelle Caulfield, Superintendent of the Corning Painted Post Area School District in Corning, New York. Michelle, welcome to An Imperfect Leader.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here.
When you and I first talked about coming on the podcast, you had reservations. And then something happened. You wrote to me, I try to balance my head and my heart as a leader. And I just met with about 60 students at our high school at their invitation. And you were discussing stress. And you walked away. You said, I walked away feeling like I needed to share my story, our story here in Corning. So I hope you'll consider me even after such a long wait. So first of all, I know that you're perfect for our podcast because you're clearly a human-centered leader. You value and you honor student voice. And by the way, my impressions were confirmed when I read an article about you where you said you wanted people to know 3 things about you: that you're about student success, that you believe teachers and staff make a difference every day for the lives of children, and that you're passionate about the community. So when you think about the story of Corning or Corning Painted Post, what do you say?
So the first word that always comes to mind for me is opportunity. My predecessor and mentor, superintendent before me, spent a lot of his career with facilities work and getting our buildings restored and more in the 20th century, like moving into the 20th century. And I feel like it's my job now to fill those spaces with students and leaders and educators and staff who are all about creating more opportunities for our kids.
So if I understand correctly, your predecessor was about building, and now you get to stand on their shoulders and build something you couldn't have done it without that person. So now you get to build upon that and provide opportunities for kids. So what are some of those that come to mind that you're just like so excited about?
So we have a lot of student clubs and a lot of student-led groups that I think we have encouraged to share their voice so that they help us with decision-making, really helps us with our strategic planning, our thought processes around our strategic planning. Our clubs always come generated from student requests. Some of the ones that I'm most proud of are we balance a Black American club. We balance an Asian American club. We have an LGBTQ club. We also have a Jesus club. We have a very strong student council club. So we really try to listen to what our students share with us and then try to make what they're asking for become a reality for them.
I love that you have all of these student-generated and focused clubs. And what I have noticed over the years, having been a superintendent, is that those clubs often engage with each other and do things together. And it is sometimes the adults in the community who don't recognize that and create these sort of lanes, these very specific lanes. And we're saying, oh, no, it's more of a mosaic, or it's like a stitched quilt. Like we actually do, like the kids look for ways to have their specific interests and then see where those interests and common ground can be forged. Have you seen that?
Absolutely. And they do work together all the time. Student council clubs work to bring everyone together to highlight different activities that they're hosting and invite all students to participate. So it doesn't have to be just because you're involved in this one specific area. I think, because all of our teachers and our staff really try to listen to what they're really saying, like underneath whatever it is that they bring to us, that we have that ability to create a space for them where they can all feel heard, but also all feel like they can share their own stories with their fellow peers.
If I reach into my desk behind me, I've got these like little like panning for gold things that I used to give out to principals to say, like, sometimes a parent's going to come to your office and they're kind of hollering, they're screaming about certain things. Or you sit down with someone and they're talking in all over the place. But sometimes you just really have to pan for gold. And it's like I just needed like a little symbol to see where are those nuggets, because often the parent who's yelling and screaming in our offices is scared for their kid. They're worried. They love their child and they're doing the best they can. And they don't know what to do. And this is the 9th time you've called them to say that there's something wrong. Or the child who, to your point, who is saying we'd like to create this club and really understanding what they're trying to achieve. Is there something that made you think about?
Well, yeah, a particular group that we have started in the last few years is called the Unified Youth Activation Committee. It's a unified focus where students with special needs and regular ed students kind of combine to do all kinds of activities together. We have basketball and soccer and track. But what I've noticed is all the other clubs want to participate in those activities as well. So it's a perfect example of all of our students coming together to really support one group of students, even though every student in the school benefits from being part of it.
I think that's a super example of showing how there's not just, sometimes I do like an Olympics type of thing, and it's sort of one day and that's it. And to have a club that filters through all throughout the entire year really demonstrates our exceptional children are absolutely a part of our community. And it ought not to be one sort of singular event that unites us, that it ought to be all the time, that we're really thinking about that. I love that.
Absolutely. And it's not parent driven or community driven or teacher driven. It's student driven.
What a great example of preparing kids for life. So many leaders, they perseverate about like what's not working. I call this active negative data. It's almost like doom scrolling about what's wrong. And you really appear to approach things through an appreciative lens. What's working? And wondering, how do we get more of that? So what's one thing that you're just excited about? What's working in Corning?
So I think, our motto is students are the center of all we do. And the theme for the last few years since I took over as the superintendent in July of 2020, we know what was happening in July of 2020.
What was going on?
Yeah, we've had this very strong community school feeling around together as one. And we have not let that go in the last 5 years. We've continued with that motto of together as one, and we've changed it a little bit to the power of one and what does each individual have to offer to make the whole a better place. And I think that's one of the things I really think is working in Corning is we constantly are thinking about what the impact of our decisions will be. Sometimes more than we think about the financial implication, like what is the implication for students more than what is the financial implication for the district as a whole. And we let that impact for students kind of lead our decision making. And I would say that it always comes back to what does the student need to be successful? And that's opened the doors for many of our students, whether it's CTE programs or we were missing a group of kids. We have so many athletic teams, but we started drone soccer this year because there are a set of kids that are competitive, but aren't athletes in that way, but they are competing at the state level this weekend in drone soccer in our first year out of the gate.
That's so amazing. I mean, certainly, we hear of esports and the inclusion of esports. What is drone soccer?
So I feel like it's a combination of soccer and Quidditch from Harry Potter. It's like this, they play in this netted area. There are 2 goals on each side, and they have to program the drones, build the drones, learn to fly them, learn the rules of the game, blocking and scoring and all of those things. It's a really complicated game, but it's really awesome that our kids are doing so well and are so competitive at it in a way that you wouldn't normally view kids as competitive.
I love it. I mean, thinking about how our biggest goal is, when you say kids at the center, is having children feel as if they belong and then they're seen and that they're valued and that they're honored, and finding ways to do that. I'd never heard of drone soccer. I cannot wait to look it up. If you're just joining us on An Imperfect Leader, my guest today is Michelle Caulfield, Superintendent of the Corning Painted Post Area School District. Now, in the leadership model that I use, there are 3 dimensions: collective aspiration, nested patterns, and leaders learning work. And nested patterns is creativity and courage. So the soccer is amazing. That's such a great example. But another way of saying those terms is innovation. So I read in your strategic plan, which was adopted in 2024, and there was a goal associated with innovation. And never has this goal been more important. It had to do with recruitment efforts. Specifically, it was a goal to explore innovative approaches to recruiting staff and then filling vacancies. We have shortages all over the country. And so I'm really interested in this super important goal. So with that in mind, what are some creative ways that you have been able to implement or a way to attract highly qualified staff?
I think we found ourselves in the same boat where you just are constantly doing the same thing over and over again and, banging your head against the wall because you're not getting the candidates that you want, the quality of candidates that you want. And we decided as an admin team to really dive into what were the blockers? What were the things that were stopping people from coming here? We have 21 districts in our BOCES region. So because we are so closely related to each other, there's a lot of choice because there are so many shortages. You could go 5 minutes down the road and be in a different school district. And we really had to focus in on what can we do here in Corning to be productive. 3 of the things that we decided to do were to do job fairs for all of our transportation, our cleaners, where they could come to one location one day. Everyone could be interviewed and offered a position. So you didn't have to wait a few days. You didn't have to send in your information in advance. It was on the spot interviewing, on the spot offers for those positions.
Because sometimes they say they do an interview and they say, thanks, we'll get back to you. And in this case, they had the authority to be able to make on the spot, we call them golden tickets sometimes. We're like, you get a certain number of golden tickets to offer. And so that's certainly, in that moment, you had someone who you could then hire and be able to move forward.
Absolutely.
Neat.
And our assistant superintendent of human services kind of came up with that idea and got everybody on board. So that was really great. One of the other things we did for the interviewing teams was create a bias training. So they have to sit for a 3-hour or 6-hour training for just knowing, recognizing, understanding your own bias when you sit in an interview, so that we weren't always hiring the same person, the reflection of us, but allowing for some other things. And that really made more people in our district want to be part of our interview committees because they felt more confident in the decisions that they were making. So that's the second thing we did. And then the third thing we did was work with teacher colleges in our area, where we went to them and presented in front of all of their candidates, almost like we were selling ourselves instead of them selling themselves to us as interviewers. We were kind of the interviewees when we went and sat at those teacher colleges. And that just got our name and faces out there. We're kind of near the Finger Lakes in New York. So, lots of farm country, lots of hiking, those kinds of things. I still remember someone that was interviewing for one of our foreign language positions. She called in the morning and said, which train do I take to get to you? I don't know which train to take. And I was like, oh, there are no trains. There are no trains here. I think she lived in the city in New York City, and she thought she was going to hop on the A train and get here. And so there was no interview that day for that position.
Oh, man. Yeah.
So,
good lesson learned.
So I think it's really important that we're trying to sell ourselves to people, because there just are so many opportunities for people to have a job that we have to somehow highlight who we are.
Yeah, and you get to send a message. You're so important to us. We're coming to you. Not that we feel like you need to come to us in this sort of power dynamic. we're saying, in our community and in our school district, our teachers and whoever it is, you are so important to us. We're willing, able, and interested in meeting you, in a place where you feel most comfortable. I'd like to ask you a question that I ask every guest who comes on our program. How does the term an imperfect leader resonate for you?
Well, I wish it didn't resonate so well, I think, because I'm constantly reflecting on what we could do better in every situation and where we could have started in a better position from the beginning. I think I'm a fixer at heart. And so sometimes when I'm listening to people, I'm already fixing. I'm already fixing instead of listening.
Oh my gosh. And so what Jamie Almadsand, who you and I share as a friend and a mentor, he will always say to me, stop, just listen before, you don't have to fix it. And I'm like, oh yeah, I know. So anyhow, sorry, I interrupted.
No, yes. So I've had to slow down a little bit and almost ask, am I listening to listen so that you're just getting it out and you're just telling me what was happening? Or am I listening to understand? Or am I listening to fix? And I almost have to put myself in that mindset. And I know that can sometimes make me a great leader, but it also, if I'm in that, I'm going to fix it and I'm already fixing it. Once you've already started, that can be a hindrance with my team and with my staff. And I would say the biggest struggle I have is when I can't fix it. When there's just not a way to fix it and we have to live with that. Or, so I kind of work at showing up and showing up more and hoping that sometimes just showing up and listening to understand will help.
And we'll be right back. Hey, district leaders, I know you already know this. In schools worldwide, cell phones are posing real challenges on student engagement and mental well-being, and I want you to meet Yonder, a proud sponsor of an Imperfect Leader. And let me share this story from a visit I made to some schools in Silicon Valley. I asked some kids what they liked about Yonder, and after some funny looks, they shared that actually, with Yonder, teachers don't have to battle with them over phones anymore. In fact, one kid said to me he didn't have to worry anymore about his parents texting him in class, and the kid next to him sort of shoved him and goes, "Texting? My mom used to FaceTime me in class." I want to introduce you to a support system that increases teaching and learning. I want you to discover why 1 million students choose Yonder daily. Minimize distractions, maximize learning potential. To learn more, go to overyonder.com. YONDR.
We're back for segment 2 of An Imperfect Leader called Imperfect Leadership in After Action. And my guest today is Michelle Caulfield, Superintendent of the Corning Painted Post Area School District in Corning, New York. All right, Michelle, this is the segment where we ask our guests to deconstruct a decision that they made, and then we discuss it. So what happened?
So I think I'm going to talk to you a little bit about our budget last year. Our budget failed the first time out, and we had tried to go over our tax cap. And in New York State, when you go over your tax cap, you have to have 60% of your community approve that budget. Typically, if it's at the tax cap or below, you need 50% to pass your budget. So,
may I interrupt for one quick second? Just because for most of the nation, this is going to be a foreign concept. For most of the nation, it's their 5 or 7 member board that approves the budget, and that's it. In Connecticut, the board approves, but it goes to the city council, and the city council has a committee that then sends it back to the school board to reconcile. In New York, it's very different. So would you mind just walking us through just briefly, how does a budget get approved in New York State?
Sure. So in New York, school districts create a budget, which the board approves, and then that budget goes out to the community for vote in May.
Every year?
Every single year. And you need 50% of your community to support it. And that means every member of your community has a vote. It is not just people with students in your school district. It is every person that lives in the Corning area. So each year we develop that budget in March, April. And in May, they vote. And then we start that process again, November, December-ish, kind of bring it to the public in March, April, and they vote again in May. So if your budget is not approved, you have 2 options. You can go out again with that same budget. You can go out again with a new budget, or actually there's a third is contingency, which is that it has to remain exactly the same monetary number that it was the year prior.
Okay, so if you lose students or you gain students, I mean, that's where typically our much of our revenue comes from, right? Is the ADA. How does that impact the budget? That, if you had the same budget, it doesn't matter if you got more students, you have to stick with the budget in that third option.
Absolutely, which means a reduction of staff or reduction of services for the community of
Oh, right,
students.
because through collective bargaining or whatever, I mean, people's salaries and costs increase. And so now wow. What an endeavor each year. I mean, for many of us, if we're going to go for a bond or a tax levy, even if it's not increasing the tax rate, but it's extending one's tax rate, that's, every other year or every few years where you go to the community. And that is such a heavy lift to do that annually in New York State. You're perpetually talking about your district to your community.
Absolutely. And we're also trying to make sure that it's not just our families that understand what we're doing, but also the rest of the community, which is 65% of our community does not have, students in the school system. So they do not get the same amount of communication that our families do. So it's also trying to balance what they know and how much they need to know to help them vote successfully for us.
Okay. So last year, you went through the process, you brought it to your board, they approved, you went to your community in May, and you did not reach the 50 or 60% threshold.
So we were asking to go over the tax cap, which means we needed 60%.
Okay.
60%.
All right.
And we did get over 50, but we did not reach the 60% mark. So that means that the budget failed, which means we do have to reduce program. We have to reduce people. And those are always hard conversations and hard decisions to have to make because everyone believes that their area is as valuable as everyone else's. And that is all true. Both things are true.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're about kids and you're about providing opportunities, it is easy to make the case that each individual area is making a difference for kids. So which option did you then go for?
So we came back to the drawing board and we went out again with our 50% at the tax cap levy. And we were successful the second time.
So when you're looking back, no doubt you did your own after action review with your team and your CFO and your board. What would you say got overlooked?
I think what I did was I followed our normal process and it wasn't normal. Like there's very few times that you try to go over your tax cap, never in the time I've been here. And I've been in the district for 25 years. And so that's not something that we do. And I applied the same rules that we would use as if it was a normal process. And it didn't work.
What did you learn about relationships or what new relationships were formed?
I think I had to come to the realization that some of my strengths in communication with the community, I was placing maybe in the wrong places. I sit on a lot of boards in our community just so that our voice as a school district is there, whether it's the Chamber of Commerce or the IDA or the Arts Council of the Southern Tier, places that I want school district voice to be present. So I put myself there. But there's also an entire community of retired people that I don't think I spent much time focusing on how to get the information to them other than our yearly newsletter that talks about our budget. And so I needed to find ways to connect with them on a personal level, the same way I connect with other members of the community. So the second time out, I went to them. I even volunteered to go to McDonald's where the older guys have coffee or, to a coffee shop where they sit every morning at 8:00 and really tried to make connections with people that I'm not normally in front of. So I think it was good for me to learn that the other 60% matter. And even though they're not my direct audience, on that day, they're my most important audience.
Sure. And in a lot of ways, I mean, there were people who made decisions for their children previous to and now you're asking them to make decisions for someone else's children. And that's a hard concept, particularly when community members, particularly those who are aging and trying to figure out how to make ends meet and things like that, that they sometimes they don't remember how important it is for a community for its schools to win, right? The community with the best schools wins. And so you get all 20 districts around. You want a community that is thriving, not dying. You want a community that has opportunities for kids and that, where graduates might return to the community and raise their families there. And so all of that matters. But if you're only sending it in a once a year newsletter, it may not be top of mind for them. So I think it's a real innovation to go to the McDonald's where the guys are gathering in the morning for their coffee, or the local diner, before, after they've gotten up early and worked on, at least in my district where I was, after they've done their chores on the farm, they would stop at this local diner and get together. And they were trying to figure out, how to make ends meet. And so being able to share with them what we were trying to achieve. And CTE, those courses were a big answer for them. They were like, oh, you're doing this really important work around whether it's agriculture or even aeronautics, or they got really excited about those types of programs that started to shift their thinking about what school looks like for kids today.
Yes. I think too, I tried to shift the language. You brought up perfect examples. Like I went and talked about the kids that we're putting in front of manufacturing jobs and farming jobs in our area, which hasn't been a focus in a long time in our area anyway. But we have.
Yeah, they think that schools look down on, and so just reminding, farmers like, hey, by the way, we don't eat unless you do your work and you do it well. And they're like, oh, yeah. Oh, you get it. Okay. You can count on me for that budget.
Trying to break that stigmatism of BOCES. People think, oh, the kids that go to BOCES, BOCES is where we're sending kids who are coming out certified to do jobs with certifications already, job offers already, and just making sure that they have a real understanding of why we're spending the money, where we're spending the money. And that was really helpful.
I love it. What frustrated you?
So back to my listening that I wasn't doing very well. I had some trusted members of my team more worried about going out above the tax cap than I was. Our last 4 or 5 budgets were 80% of the people voted yes, high 70s. I had no indication from prior years that it would be a problem because we were always in the high 70s, low 80s in terms of that passing rate. And my trusted community members were all supportive of the decision because they knew what it means for kids and the programs that they have. So I wasn't listening to the undercurrent. I was listening to the people who were directly in my ear. And I know better than that. Like I really do. I know better than that. But I also wasn't willing to let the things go that we were going to have to let go without trying to go over. So it was definitely.
That's interesting, right? I mean, as a leader, you get a lot of input. And part of that input likely is these programs are so important. And in order to continue them, you're going to have to ask the community to increase that threshold to allow you to pay for them. And so looking back, you could have said, look, this is the budget we have. We're going to stick with it, which means that we may have to make some cuts. You're coming out of the pandemic. You're trying to provide opportunities for kids. The very nature of children has changed post-pandemic. And so you're trying to continue to engage kids in meaningful ways. And if you hadn't asked the community for its approval, you might have been accused of selling yourself short of what your vision was. At least that's what I'm hearing you say. Does that seem accurate?
Yeah, I think I try to be daring. Our district definitely wants to always go for it. Try to create more opportunities. What do we need to do something bigger, better, get that one group where they need to be? So this was an opportunity for me to say, hey, if we can do this, then we can keep everything we have and we can keep looking to grow. And I think that mentality was so in my head that I wasn't able to hear people saying, but the town just did assessments for houses in this one neighborhood and they went up. They are already frustrated with what's happening.
Gotcha. Their property taxes are going up and you're going to ask for an additional fee. Yeah.
So they may be no's now where they wouldn't have been no's in the past. And, a little bit of a perfect storm. And I should have known to do what I normally do is have town hall meetings and go to them and get the information in front of them. And I was a little too confident that they were so supportive that it would be okay. And I learned that it wasn't. But I also learned what their threshold is. They are supportive of school and they did vote yes the second time out. So I did learn that, but they weren't willing to go above and beyond. They were willing to do what they needed to do and wanted to do, but weren't necessarily ready to go above and beyond. And you can't read your community wrong. I learned that I need to make sure that I'm reading my community correctly.
Well, I think in the second time, though, you also showed your community that you do listen and that you didn't come back with the same the same referendum again to ask them to vote on option one. Well, we're going to try again. Instead, you said, okay, we need to adjust based on the feedback that we're getting. You care about your schools. And so we're asking for the same budget that we had or the 50% threshold instead. And so I think that's meaningful. In the end, what was something that was good that came out of the situation for you as a leader?
Well, for me, it was to listen to my team, to get out more in front of people, but also to keep my head up and my shoulders back when you're loose and greet it again with the same kind of compassion and love and also energy to get it done.
What advice would you give to an aspiring leader?
I think you have to believe that every situation is an opportunity. No matter how bad it feels in the moment, you have to try to look for what can we gain out of this? What did we learn out of this? How can we do it better next time? That has to be the way you think, because I think these are very rewarding jobs. Being a superintendent, being a leader in a school district is incredibly rewarding and incredibly exhausting. So you also have to be true to who you are. If you are constantly trying to be someone that you're not in the job, I think you would burn out and wouldn't be successful. And you have to be the right person at the right time for that job. I would say that you need to believe in your soul that there is more to learn. You do not know it all. And you have to be willing to listen for understanding and learning all the time. And leading with your heart and honesty is the way to build that trust in your community, with your staff, with your students. And that shows in your actions.
It's beautifully said. You know, when we were on our break, I asked you about, was year 3 hard? That was my year 3. I was so confident that I had figured it out. And then it's when it all blew up for me. And it's not, you can recover. It's just, you take a big loss and you just sort of you have to figure it out again. So I think we'll end there, though. Our guest today was Michelle Caulfield, the superintendent of the Corning Painted Post Area School District in Corning, New York. And Michelle, as I was writing some notes as you were talking, there were a couple of things. One is just your focus on providing opportunities for kids and allowing that to be student-driven, giving them the agency to control their school district. The hope is one day that their children will inherit the school district they got to help create. And I think that's just a marvelous vision. The fact that, even with a budget fail, that you went back and you engaged in what you know to be true, that listening and engagement with your community, the vast majority who don't have children in your schools, will really result in something pretty fantastic. And so you had said earlier about whether, apologizing for the wait in terms of agreeing to be on the podcast. I would say this was totally worth the wait. Thank you so much for giving me your time today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, Peter, we're back.
We are.
Which one do you want to talk about first? Actually, I have a question for you.
Oh, okay.
What would you do if there were a zombie apocalypse?
Run.
Yeah,
or maybe run towards it. Just get bitten in the neck and be done with it.
Yeah. Run either way. If you run away or run towards it, it's equal. They will catch you because I'm pretty sure you're not that fast. And then, or B,
short spurts.
Go.
Actually, can I tell you? I remember in middle school, I was in the track team and I was very slow. And then at the end of the season, they were doing sort of like, we'll do all these different activities as a way to sort of this culminating event of what a great season we had. And I won the running backwards sprint. And they're like, well, if we had known how fast you were running backwards, we may have suggested it in terms of a real race.
We may have put you on the third leg of the 400
running backwards and forward.
Relay.
The 400 relay backward.
Their handoffs are perfect. They're perfect. Every single time. He never misses. He can see it perfectly.
It's unbelievable. Well, I appreciate that question. So you live in California. I'm now in
Correct.
Washington State. And in Missouri, the way that we did school budgets essentially was we had a process. We had to have, by state statute, one public hearing. Not typically would we get that many people would come and give any public comment. The board doesn't respond. They close that public hearing. And then we open up the next meeting and they approve the budget. And you hope
Right.
for a 7-0 vote, which is typically to say we've done such a good job of explaining the budget that there are no confusions or complications, and then that's it. They approve the budget and you're done. The budget is set for the next year. In New York State, as you heard, it's unbelievable to me that they have to go to their community. And of course, I grew up in New York State, so I didn't realize that my parents every year were going out to vote for the budget. And so you have to present to your community and they either vote it up or they vote it down. And if you want to ask for more money, an increase to the tax rate, then they have to vote for it at a higher threshold. And so obviously, as you saw, she went for that higher threshold. It didn't pass. They had to go back and rethink it. Now, if you were to ask me just in terms of like my own perspective of like, wow, as a leader, her own reflection about where she overlooked or what she overlooked in terms of following the same process that she had always used and applying it to a greater ask. And then just in terms of what she learned from that.
I mean, she said, I think I came to the realization, this is when she, in her reflection on not doing it, first she said, basically, I think what I did was I followed my normal process and it wasn't normal. The situation wasn't normal. And I think I came to the realization that some of my strengths with communication with the community were being placed maybe in the wrong places. I saw it on boards, etc. And she had to sort of figure out that she might need to go somewhere else to talk to the community.
Totally agree. And when she said that, I needed to rethink my efforts in terms of connecting with my retired community members at those local gathering spots. So I remember my own mentor saying to me, hey, you need to engage your local community. And my mentor had taken over a district that was 1 point from being unaccredited. There were local churches and pastors and community members advocating against the public school district, saying don't vote for their tax increases or their bonds or anything like that. And so what she recognized as a way to flip the switch and flip the narrative was to begin going to senior centers and going to local churches, particularly when the older community was gathering, and say, I have a lanyard for you. It will give you entry to any sports match, any school play. Anytime we're doing something publicly, we want you there.
That's great.
And
That's
began to shift the way that, there are some amazing things happening. And always having student docents meeting you at the door. We're so glad you're here. Come see us. Can I help you to your seat? I mean, it was just a real shift in the way of engaging the community. And that can be the difference. And certainly was for me when we were going for a tax increase. They're not just voting for themselves as a homeowner. If they're a small business owner in your community, they're also voting to increase their taxes as a business as well. And so they're being taxed twice. And so they really have to care about what you're proposing and the vision that you're casting.
I think that if there's a theme here with Michelle, it's the theme of I see it one way, but it turns out there are other people that see the context differently than me. And it took a minute for me to figure that out. It makes me think of the way in which she describes drone soccer. And I'm like, I'm pretty sure your understanding of drone soccer is not the actual people who play drone soccer's understanding of drone soccer.
Yeah, would they say it's like Quidditch? It's like Quidditch. Yeah. I love that.
I do too. It doesn't diminish her joy of the connection that the kids found. I've worked with a couple of different elementary schools where they had effort. They both had a mixed racial population, meaning not majority white. There were majority people of color, and they had trouble recruiting parents to the PTA. And so the PTA would meet, and there were perpetually, and there were a lot of white families that were part of the PTA, and we're perpetually saying, how do we increase our participation? Story one, this is the easiest one. It was a predominantly Latino. Other group of families were predominantly Latino at this one school, elementary school. And the PTA decided to start having PTA meetings at 7:30 in the morning when every mama dropped their kids off. And
that's super smart, because typically, at least my experience in Oakland, California, doesn't mean that it's the same everywhere. was that parents lingered a little bit after they dropped off at 7:30, and this was community time. This was a time to build community. So why not? Why not?
All
say,
they
hey,
did, all the PTA did was
we'll
like
have a
bring
cup
their
of coffee,
table outside.
right?
They brought it outside to where there was mamas and papas that had their strollers with their babies, and they dropped their kids off, and they brought a table outside and it had coffee and pastries, and people lingered and ate, and then they had a meeting.
Super smart.
And then the other one is even more radical. The other one, in this case, a white and African American community disbanded the PTA. They got rid of it and created a brand new organization.
The acronym PTA suggested a very white middle class.
Yes,
and
exactly.
I think where I was a teacher, our principal created a PTO and said it was just a parent teacher organization. Yeah. It was just a slight shift to say we're going to be something a little different. Speaking of bias, I love the fact that here's a positive about bias.
Speaking of
hey, speaking of bias, how about that bias, huh? Okay. All right.
Speaking of baseball, what do you think of baseball?
Speaking of bias, I love that Michelle, as she's thinking of innovative ways, and you and I have talked in the past about innovation doesn't have to be some like grand innovation. Innovation can just be thinking about doing it in a different way, and that's an innovation. And so being really clear about how they're going to recruit teachers, recruit staff, engage in those recruitment strategies, that should include bias training for those who are on the interview teams. And I just thought that's an innovation. That is hey, let's just pause for a second, because we will always get the same results we've always gotten if our system continues to operate in the same way. And if we're going to recruit and we're going to have diversity of perspective, experience, race, class, sexual orientation, and that brings its own set of tensions when you recruit and your staff looks different, because they will bring new perspectives to the work. And that's important. And at the same time, we're never going to be able to hire those individuals or make them feel as if they're going to belong in our system unless we've gone through some really important training from the front, right from the very beginning. So I was just like, this is really cool, because I would tell you as a downstater from New York, there's a bias about upstate. And she's pretty funny about it as well, right? I think she said to you where they live, or where the district where Corning Page Post is.
Yeah, not upstate. Whatever.
It is upstate.
It is upstate, according to people from New York.
You got to go north
Manhattan.
to Albany and hang a left. There's nothing more upstate than that. However, I mean, I guess at the Canadian border up in Buffalo and Rochester. Okay, yeah, sure. However, it is upstate. And I loved her story where you got to tell, because I think it's really funny, about the art teacher, the candidate.
I mean, I just loved it. I thought I'm not a New Yorker. I love New York.
I'll tell it. Because here's your New Yorker who's saying, hey, I've got an appointment with you, so I'm just kind of curious, what train do I take? And she's
exactly.
like, what do you mean, what train?
There's no train.
Do I get on the A train? Do I transfer?
There's no train.
There's no train here. Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah,
Brooklyn
we're gonna
to Harlem.
have to reschedule this conversation. So funny.
Oh, goodness gracious!
I know.
I think what I love about that is to the same theme here. It's other people's perspectives are so valuable, and it's so hard for our own brains to shift to valuing other people's perspectives. It takes so much intervention, perpetual conversation. It's very difficult to be open to the idea that the diversity that other people bring is worthwhile. You can say it, you can know it, but to actually do it and to take that in, it requires an intervention like a formal training, and even more so, like over and over and over, repeated.
Hey, let me ask you this, because before we heard the conversation, you said that you've been working with Corning Painted Post, you've been working with Michelle, and that you're just so excited about it. And so I'm kind of, what was the work that you were doing? What are you so excited about? I mean, as you listened to the conversation, your takeaway must have been, to some extent, like, oh, we were a part of this.
What I'm most proud of, Peter, is that I can't tell where we had an impact on it. We definitely have done multiple thinking about bias, but thinking about multiple perspective and how to actually leverage that for your own leadership, etc. We've done those kind of workshops with them, but we've done a lot of different things. We've done board trainings. We have done strategic planning with them. We have done Our student leadership model, we've implemented our student leadership model, which is about students impacting and influencing instructional change in their school district. We've done a bunch of different things. And to be honest, Michelle is it's a big compliment to Michelle. Michelle is the kind of superintendent that is able to think about, make way for other people to lead, and then to take what she needs to make it her own. That I didn't hear us in it. I heard Michelle. She was great.
I imagine if we were to come back and ask Michelle, she would say, look, I've always been about students are at the center of all we do. And the reason why I linked myself or stitched myself to Jamie and his team is because they're also wanting to leverage that student voice. We never lose sight of that student voice as part of students are at the center of everything that we do. And so I think it was just a natural fit. And maybe you didn't hear it because it really is. It just permeated all parts of the work that's going on there.
I mean, it is truly a partnership. I mean, it's probably one of the best examples that I have of our work working, of our framework working, and that we are a coaching organization that supports leadership development across the entire system, from students to superintendent and board. And that's what we've been partnered with them, and we get to partner with them on multiple different pieces of work, and we will be partnered with them again.
Neat. All right. I think this has been great.
I do too. It is great. It's always great. Me and you were both at the end of the thing. That was great. Great conversation. Keep on being great.
I know exactly. Okay.
Wouldn't it be nice for our listeners sometimes at one point for us to say, yeah, that was fine. Whatever. Hopefully next week will be better.
Al Franken, he says, we got a great guest this week for a change. Every time. We got a great program. Change.
That's funny.
I love it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, it's been a great week for a change, Jamie. See you next week.
See you next week.
You've been listening to An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast.
Music for An Imperfect Leader was written and arranged by Ian Varley. Sam Falbo created our artwork, a wood print inspired Daruma doll butterfly. Remember, imperfect leadership is not a scarlet letter. It's a badge of honor. It recognizes that serving as a lead learner is about being a vulnerable leader, an empathetic leader, a compassionate leader. We are proud to be imperfect leaders, so join us next time for another episode of An Imperfect Leader, the Superintendents and Leadership Podcast.